Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll start off by welcoming my distinguished guest, Dr. محمد الحليم, the political analyst. Doctor, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Doctor, if we're talking about the president after meeting the Czech foreign minister, he really spoke about enhancing the relationship between Egypt and the Visegrad group, which consists of Hungary, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Poland. Now, before we start talking about the Egyptian relations with these countries and the Visegrad group as a whole, can you please shed more light on the political weight or the economic importance, for instance, of this specific Visegrad group to the European Union, being part of both the European Union and NATO as well? We're used to talking about the Egyptian-German relations, or the French ones, or the Italian ones, or the Spanish, but what about this group? What is their role and their weight within the European Union?
Right. Established as a union, actually, in 1991, they seem to be quite practicing a great deal of influence as much as a strategic importance, not only within, as you might have said right now, on the European Union, being part and parcel of it, but in the meantime, of the community of the whole Europe, actually. They are practicing very strong roles in unifying themselves among each other, the four countries, the aforementioned one, constituting the group as much as the military power. In the meantime, against all the advances and advancement, actually, of the Russian troops within the African continent, they are quite aware of the importance of Africa as a continent in the meantime. They are reproducing ways and means through which they can be very much collaborating, as much as inviting Egypt, considering the importance of Egypt within the Mediterranean area as strategic importance, as economic power, as much as military existence, actually, parading and existing its own influence within the African continent as much as within the Mediterranean area. They are quite aware of the importance of Egypt, as I've just mentioned, and as such, they are inviting Egypt not only, since 1991, but perhaps the most distinction summit was in 2017, when they invited His Own Excellency President Abdel Fattah actually to achieve a great deal of agreements, as much as protocols of cooperation among Egypt on the one hand and the four VS countries. Actually, from military point of view, they seem to be quite very much practicing an influential role, being part and parcel of the European Union, but they are very much a preservative type of countries. They are very much conservative in the sense that they are not, propagating the sense of expansion of the illegal immigrants actually to their own country, nor even they would give a simple or ample opportunity actually for political asylum seekers actually to get in their own countries. They are very much the nearest approach to the United Kingdom, very much conservative, very much, I wouldn't say living in an ivory tower, but very much preservative actually, not influencing, not accepting, not parading the possibility or giving the opportunity actually for the other nationalities to be in or to be within. And some other political analysts are very much amazed of the fact that Egypt had been invited as the first and perhaps the only Mediterranean country within the Mediterranean area, represented by His Own Excellency Mr. Abdel Fattah, to attend that sort of summit, actually, to attain that sort of strategic partnership. They are very much, as I've just mentioned, aware of it, and Egypt seems to be quite the third foreign country, actually, outside the four aforementioned, actually, countries, representing that sort of unity, apart from Japan on the one hand and Germany on the other. Egypt seems to be the rest among the all other Arab countries, as much as the Mediterranean ones, actually, to be able to participate and to have their own say about, the words, about the illegal immigration, about fighting terrorism, and about minimizing to a greater extent the sort of the political asylum seekers, actually. That's why, despite the fact that, as you might have said at the very beginning of the episode, that they are not very much widely known, propagating their own existence here, there, and everywhere, but they have got their own say about it. The sort of the thing that Israel actually was quite aware of it, because, being very much tight within the orbit of the United States of America, no matter, the suit of the president, maybe. They have had very good ties with Israel at the very beginning, but the breach did begin actually when, Poland, at one respect, in 2018, actually, would reproduce a decree, a certain law that would, forbid almost those people who had been jailed and imprisoned on account of what you might call the Holocaust, that they are to be set free, that they are to be very much not blamed for their own representation of their own strict point of view of the Holocaust, of the isolation of the Jews. That's why Israel started to frown on them. And Poland would ask the Jewish ambassador actually to excuse, I wouldn't say excuse, to apologize, to represent an apology actually. But because of the, the stubborn mind actually of the Jewish ambassador, he refrained from, and he rejected any sort of apology. That's why the sort of the summit that was destined actually to be held in Jerusalem in 2018 was, stopped to a greater extent.
Yes.
And because of that sort of thing, because of the importance of this type of group, Israel is trying to communicate itself with them, is trying to, ask their own assistance as voting for them, actually, as voting for their own rejecting attitudes towards, Palestinian state and the establishment of the Palestinian state and the Palestinian cause, in much the same way that they would like to accept their own endorsement, actually, within the face of Tehran as well. That's why they are very much aware of their own importance, actually, within the European continent, and the sort of the very much strategic and powerful role that they would exercise, actually, either by representing their own extreme sense of fortune, because they are very much wealthy countries, very much well-to-do countries, actually perhaps the fifth among the European Union in high income, and 11th among the whole Europe. But they have got, as I've just said, they have got their own very much distinctive identity, very much sort of distinctive personality, actually. They are facing every now and again the European Union by representing their own absolute sense of rejection, of accepting any strangers, any political asylum seekers as much as local immigrants, actually.
Well, you've touched upon many different aspects of this cluster, the Visegrad group, and I want to break them down one by one. The first one you've mentioned was their nature in dealing with asylum seekers and refugees, and Egypt is well known to really. It has been quite successful in dealing with illegal immigration. Its reputation around the world is quite renowned.
Absolutely
You've
right.
mentioned that Egypt was picked to participate. It's one of the leading countries in doing that. And all of the observers and all of the media, when they tackled that meeting, they were always talking about illegal immigration being on top of the agenda of these talks. How can Egypt help them and help benefit them in dealing with such an issue, and how can we benefit from assisting them?
Right. Right. The fact that Egypt is quite known since the advent of His Own Excellency Mr. Fattah Sisi actually to the presidential scene, of abiding all those people, actually, of giving them a sort of shelter, of reproducing a sort of a land and a nation as much as a home for them, so to speak, actually. And instead of being very much scattered diaspora, actually, of being here, there, and everywhere, very much scattered all over the world, you can really find that even those people who would come to seek a sort of asylum or a sort of a homeland within Egypt, they are not to be isolated from the rest of the community. They are to be given the same rights as much as any sort of individual indigenous Egyptian citizen, actually. We have had a very good experience, actually, by the Syrian guys, actually. It came from an absolute sense of devastation, of an extreme sense of death, so to speak, only to reproduce another sort of life. Very much a flourishing one, indeed, and very much, optimistic after an extreme sense of sadness, actually, without being isolated from the rest of the other people, the Egyptian ones, I would say. They are practicing their own natural activities and everyday life to a greater extent as much as any indigenous Egyptian citizen would and could. And this is a fact that almost all the world is quite noticing and is quite aware of, actually, and the presidential authority, actually, of abiding those people and of giving them an ample opportunity, actually, to practice their own daily life and daily routine as much as they are to be or had been, actually, in their own native lands. The sort of the thing that those group of countries are quite aware of. And in the meantime, in more than one respect, they praised His Own Excellency's ability, actually, of giving shelter, of abiding those people to a greater extent, of minimizing their own illegal immigration, actually, to other countries. And the Libyan case is a notable one, actually. Once he did say at one time that certain Jafra is such a red zone and red line, actually. All sabotage as much as massacre deaths, actually, and act of devastation is stopped, including the illegal immigrants. We are reproducing and giving a sort of shelter for these people just by way of not letting them actually travel throughout, dangerous boats that would seem to be quite capsized in one conceivable respect. And in the meantime, those countries are quite aware of the sort of the extreme sense of effort that is being practiced on a ministerial level as much as presidential one, indeed, of first, minimizing the sort of the immigration of almost all those illegal immigrants, actually, to Europe in general and to these countries in particular, in much the same way that Egypt is quite keen, actually, to give them shelter. And those people are quite aware that life is money, and each single individual moment that those people would live on Egyptian territory is causing a lot. And in the meantime, they are keeping an eye on the sort of extreme sense of effort, both financial as much as economic, I would say, that is to be practiced. That's why they are quite aware of the importance of Egypt. That's why it isn't an amazement. I wouldn't find any sort of astonishing facts, actually, that would insist on inviting Egypt every now and again, knowing its own power, not only their own military power within the area, as much as practicing the sort of, democracy here, there, and everywhere, spreading sense of security in almost every conceivable respect. But in the meantime, very much able to minimize one of the headaches, actually, that seem to be quite threatening not only Europe, but actually those countries that are to be, as I've just said, very much preservative and very much conservative, very much keen to not let get in any sort of individual sort that is belonging to their own blood.
Well, sir, you've also mentioned that these countries, they have some sort of a military alliance, really being wary of a Russian involvement within the African continent. Can you please shed more light on why would they be wary of more Russian involvement in Africa, and where does this put Egypt? Because Egypt as well, it has good, healthy relations with Russia, but things are developing and changing by the day. So can you please shed more light on this?
Yeah, they are quite aware of the advancement and the sort of the dreams, actually, of the Russians to get in the heart of Africa, actually, to try to exploit its own sense of treasures, and part of which is the Libyan territorial lands, actually, the sort of the very vast great cake. Almost all the nations that would like to participate and to get their own and snatch, I would say, its piece out of it, actually. They are keen and keeping an eye on the Russian advancement, very much fortifying their own military power, and in the meantime practicing a large number of maneuvers just by way of preparing themselves for the sort of the advancement of the Russian troops within Africa. They know actually that Egypt is practicing a very strong role, and they know the sort of the very good tie and the sort of the strategic relationship to the extent of the strategic partnership, actually, between Egypt on the one hand and Russia on the other. But this is the word of diplomacy, actually. That is the word of the mutual identification of the benefits of the economic stabilities as much as of the interests, I would say. That is the political game in which almost each single individual country would know its own portion of it. We know that there are some advancement on the part of the Russia, much the same way that we are quite aware of the hidden agenda of almost all these countries that would like to be very much, dreading and very much rejecting and defending the sort of getting in. That's why we are trying to minimize the sort of the dangers of almost getting in on the part of the Russian troop, in much the same way very much practicing very good diplomatic ties as much as consulatic relations, to the extent that Mr. Abdelati, you know, I mean, the foreign minister deputy actually would reach to an agreement at the end of the day of getting into these countries without visa entry for free, actually, particularly the diplomatic passports and the consulatic passports. And this is an achievement as in itself, it really is. We are quite aware of the game and the sort of the thing that is to be practiced at the present time is just to balance the scale between our own interests actually from within and our own relations from without. How to make a sort of compromise actually between practicing a sort of diplomatic ties with the countries as much as preserving the sort of the existence of Russia actually with its own helping us in every conceivable respect through atomic power and through the Daba. This is part of the game that is to be practiced actually. But concerning those countries, they are very much practicing a very strong role. They are always there. They have got their own say about the European Union. They have got their own say about the world at large, because I mean, even America would look on them with a great deal of dignity, actually, as much as respectability, to the extent that at one time, you know, I mean, the American president, American administration would hail thanking them every now and again because of the sort of the military power and the cultural influence, as much as the sort of the social relations that are to be practiced among all other people, actually. Yes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Egypt is trying to really boost its relations with the European Union under the cooperation and strategy that is slated between Egypt and the EU for 2021-2027. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Dr. Al-Halim. Now, Doctor, the European Union has been Egypt's biggest and top trading partner for 2020 that amounted for about 24.5% of the volume of trade. And we have a strategy to boost the relationship with the EU for the next 7 years. So, what are the main aspects of such a cooperation between Egypt and the EU, and how does the framework of the Visegrad come into it?
The Visegrad is part and parcel of the European Union. They seem to be quite practicing and have their own say about almost each single individual respect about the whole affairs. But in the meantime, we are quite aware of their own existence as being part and parcel of the European Union, and we are very much practicing our own rules of exchanging information as much as commercial aids and industries as much as military powers. But I think on top of them is the retain again of tourism, the sort of the thing that a large number of the European Union actually had been deprived of for quite a long period of time. In much the same way that the V group actually are very much fascinated by the zone of the Red Sea. That's why we are inviting a large number of them for the Red Sea in one respect, enhancing tourism in the second respect. And thirdly, I think the European Union is quite aware of the sort of the power that is to be practiced by Egypt in the last 2 years, actually, particularly the sort of the advancement within Libya, within Syria, within Yemen, as much as of practicing a sense of extreme power actually within the Mediterranean area, and the sort of the gas pipes as much as defending the advances of Recep Tayyip Erdogan in much the same way, practicing what you might call recharting the map of the Mediterranean area by a large number of strategic partnerships, both with respect to Cyprus as much as Greece on the other. The fact during the previous catastrophes, actually, Egypt had always been there, and Tunisia, and Germany, and Libya, and Cyprus, and Greece, actually. To a greater extent, the European countries are quite aware of the sense of development and the strategic relations, of the expansion of the diplomatic role of Egypt, actually, particularly within Africa, who had been deprived of a large number of relations for more than 20 years. The sort of the thing that Israel would seize on and upon and would provide its own diplomats as much as consulates, as much as their own ambassadors within Africa. That's why you have had a very big problem now, and we are doing our own best actually to try to rebuild and reconstruct the sort of the demolished social as much as political relations with almost the Africans. The sort of the thing that the EU is quite aware of. That's why Egypt had always been there. The sort of the brax that is to be done, actually, not only on a military level, but actually on diplomatic relations, pacifying and easing the sort of the tussles and the struggles among the countries, as much as interfering every now and again in catastrophes and in epidemics, actually, such as the COVID-19. Egypt is playing the sort of the role of being almost supervising all the details of almost all the world. I wouldn't say the police of the world as much as America is, not from that sort of thing, but in the meantime, with a great deal of parading our own military power, as much as representing our own military bases here, there, and everywhere, from the south, from the north, from the east, and from the west. We are very much dignified, as much as protected from almost every conceivable dimension in Egypt, in much the same way you are practicing a sort of diplomacy, the soft diplomacy and the straightforward sense of relations, as much as it is indeed the case with our own peaceful, as much as very much diplomatic relations with, bringing both Fatah and Hamas at one respect, at one ditch, actually representing one unifying power, just by preparing them for the next elections.
Yes. Well, you've touched upon how Egypt can be helpful for the Visegrad group and also the European Union in terms of illegal immigration, or in terms of having a friend really within the African continent, dealing with any concerns about a Russian involvement within the African continent. But what about Egypt? How can it really benefit from the political weight of the Visegrad and the European Union? I mean, how influential can they be in different files that Egypt are tackling, be it the Ethiopian dam, be it the Eastern Mediterranean situation that involves Greece, Cyprus and Turkey? Are we talking also about COVID-19 vaccines, supplies? How effective can they be using their weight in our files and our issues?
The Visegrad countries are very much powerful, not from economic point of view, but they are very much wealthy and well-to-do, as much as they are voting and they are giving their own votes actually within the European Union. And in this particular respect, we can really benefit from their own existence of voting to our own aids in our own interests, actually. Perhaps during 2018, they have had a great deal of efforts, actually, to try to side by side with our own presidential authority, actually, to represent our own case amongst all the countries, and much the same way they turn it to be very much, representing the sort of the revolution of the Egyptians, not being a sort of the, coup d'etat, you understand? So, I mean, so they are very much aware of the situation in Egypt. They are very much knowing the sort of the power that is to be practiced. The sort of the thing that Israel is quite aware. That's why the Israeli people are frowning on that sort of relations. They're not very happy, actually, of the mutual identification between two parties. And in the meantime, one particular respect, which is the sort of the mutual exchange in benefits and goals, as much as in agendas and the maps of the roads, actually, in both parties. In one particular respect, as I've just said, tourism is benefiting to a greater extent. The illegal immigrants is very much minimized. to a sort of a degree that they have never ever heard of before, in much the same way that they would praise and thank actually the Egyptian rule of putting an end for the terrorist actions and terrorist acts that are very much threatening not only the Egyptian land, but almost all the European countries. And in one respect, in Budapest, actually, one of the diplomatic figures actually did represent one of Mr. President Fattah Sisi's words, that we are fighting terrorism in lieu of almost all the world. And instead of almost all the words, we are giving our own tribute. This is a sort of recognition of their own part of the vast power and extreme sense of safety and security that is to be practiced by the Egyptian presidential authority, actually, in minimizing the sort of the terrorists as much as spreading a sense of peace, not only within the Mediterranean area, but almost actually to a greater extent around the whole European continent, so the old continent, I would say.
Well, the Foreign Minister, Sameh Shukri, also praised the Czech Republic for showing its really willingness to economically cooperate with Egypt, and the Czech government spoke about investing and helping put $300 million, the Czech Export Bank providing $300 million to encourage Czech companies to invest in Egypt. Now, what sort of industries and what sort of sectors do we expect companies, Czech companies, to invest in Egypt?
One fundamental fact, those people are very much realistic to a greater extent, very much materialistic also to a greater extent. They wouldn't give any sort of investment or practice any sort of trade or constitute a sort of a factory or a sort of a business or a practice unless they know that they are putting their own money actually in a hotbed, in a sort of a land that would reproduce the sort of the revenue, or doubly gazettes actually, or doubly guts. In chemical industries, in the new economic zone within the Suez Canal, as much as the new administrative capital, actually. A large number of companies actually are very much belonging to the Visegrad countries. They are practicing a sort of commercial power, knowing that Egypt is the land of safety and security, knowing the sort of the stability as much as of the reproduction actually of the flourishment of almost all these commercial capital and sum of money actually that would get its own benefit at the end of the day. Knowing in the meantime, and this would stem out of the fact that, as I've just said, that there is a great diplomatic role as much as very much powerful existence of Egyptian people, as much as the Egyptian presidential authority as safeguarding the borders, as much as in the meantime proacting a sense of security on the other adjacent countries. I mean, the sort of the chairmanship of the Egyptian presidential authority is witnessed almost here, there, and everywhere, in much the same way that it seems to be quite keeping an eye almost by all the community at large, including the Western world and the Visegrad countries in the meantime.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as Dr. Abdul-Halim has mentioned, there are many grounds for cooperation between Egypt and the Visegrad group, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland and Slovakia. Part of its cooperation within the European Union. Dr. Abdul-Halim mentioned the main aspects and concerns of the Visegrad group and their keenness, explained why they are keen to enhance their relationship with Egypt, and hopefully Egypt will be quite successful in implementing its 2021-2027 strategy with the EU. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Dr. محمد Abdul-Halim, the political analyst. Dr. Abdul-Halim, always a pleasure having you with us.
My pleasure, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nara International. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.